Hello from Gardening at Douentza here in Ireland, and this is my video all about the top 10 flowering plants in my garden last year. Some flower in spring, some flower in summer, but all are beautifully colourful and outrageously floriferous. So if you're looking for some inspiration for your own garden, then stay tuned because this is the video for you. You are very welcome to this video all about my top 10 flowering plants for 2020, and I can't wait to get on and share them with you. These are ones that have done exceptionally well this year for one reason or another. Anyway, before we start, I just wanted to briefly tell you about memberships. So if you are the kind of person who's interested in the really weird and wonderful plants that are out there in this fantastic botanic world that we find ourselves in, then perhaps membership is for you. If you're interested in the extremely rare and the extremely beautiful, if you'd like to share my seeds, grow some of Douentza plants yourself in your own garden or your own plant area, if you're interested in my ebook, or if you're interested in the 6 full-length specialised videos that are already there waiting for you on the other side if you were to join up to memberships. There are also 5 live streams pre-recorded, and I'll be doing one live this Sunday. Anyway, I do hope that you will consider memberships, and if you want to find out more and exactly what you would get, then hit the join button and perhaps I'll get a chance to chat with you on Sunday. Okay, let's get on with the video. And the first flower that has done so well in my garden this year is the fantastic, is the wonderful, is the amazing Geranium and Thompson. Geraniums really are must-have garden plants, and I'm sure you've heard the adage, if in doubt of what to plant, plant a geranium, because these flowers, they fulfill such an amazing function. They spread out and they ramble gently through the foliage of other plants, filling in any space, any gap that you might have in the border, and they flower for such a very long period of time. So whereas the flowers mightn't be as large and as striking as those of other perennials, these flowers do go on for a long time, and just from the use that you can get out of geraniums in filling in space that would otherwise be vacant. So for example, you might plant spring bulbs in your garden, and after those have finished and the foliage has died back, you have a blank space. You can't plant into it because you don't want to disturb the bulbs. And this is where geraniums come in. Geraniums will fill up that space in the shortest of time and just fill the whole area with beautiful flowers all through the summer. So Ann Thompson has amazing magenta flowers with black eyes, and in their own right they really are quite pretty, and a kind of pale green foliage that darkens as the plant kind of matures through the season. And the really good news is that she will get going for you in a short period of time. So the ones that you see here in my long border were planted just 2 years ago, and already you can see how the geraniums have spread out and matured and are doing just such an amazing job. But this is not a plant that's ever going to swamp anything else in the border. It will stay neatly in its own clump. It's just the foliage that will spread out. And just before I say anything else, I would like to clear up a little bit of confusion that's out there regarding geraniums and pelargoniums. And these two plants were originally in the same genus, but in the late 1700s they were separated out. So now the florist pelargoniums, the tender plant, are in a separate genus to geraniums, which is the hardy plant I'm talking about today. But because they had originally been in the same group, they have, I guess the name geranium has gone into the vernacular, and when people mention geranium they immediately think of pelargoniums, which is not the same plant at all. Geranium, that's the one for your garden. That's the must-have plant for your garden, and I would say that very few gardens, every garden needs to have at least a handful of this amazing plants filling up any vacant space. Geranium Ann Thompson is widely recognised as one of the best geraniums to grow. Well, she came about as a result of the hybrid Ann Falkard and is just more compact. And the advantage of being more compact means that Ann Thompson looks like she has more flowers. I guess she does, in proportion to the foliage. And she really does look super in the garden. I have Ann Falkard in many other places, 2 other places actually, and she does a good job too. But I really can't recommend Geranium Ann Thompson enough. And if you're looking for somewhere to fill up in your garden, then perhaps this is the plant for you, especially if you love those amazing magenta flowers. The next plant in my top 10 for last year is a wonderful lily called Beverly Ann. Now this one is an Oriental lily, so that means it's a cross between the trumpet lily and the Oriental lily. So it takes the stature from the stately Chinese trumpet lily and the fragrance from the Oriental lily, and generally Oriental lilies have a lot more disease resistant than either of those other 2 groups may have. Anyway, this is a fantastic lily, really tall, and it has kind of like these, I suppose, would you call them burgundy? Dark brown flowers, and touches of red in there, touches of white, touches of everything, and wafts of glorious scent going around the garden. Now, for me, this lily doesn't need to be staked. It holds itself up rather well, although, you know, there is a little bit of drooping, so that generally will tend to depend on your soil. If you have very lush, moist, fertile soil, then your lily will tend to hold itself upright less. Now, this lily isn't to be confused with the Daylily or Hemerocallis of the same name. I think that Lilium Beverly Ann, the one we're talking about today, isn't actually registered, whereas the Hemerocallis, the Daylily Beverly Ann, is registered, so you'll come across that when you look it up. Anyway, this lily blooms gloriously in my garden from July onwards, something I really look forward to, and has just bulked up really nicely over time. It has a heady scent and beautiful flowers that grace, I suppose, midsummer garden. In terms of care, there's not a lot really. Just cut the stems back in spring and look out for lily beetles. So if you are in an area that doesn't have lily beetle, good for you. You should definitely grow lots and lots of lilies. I have it, and that means that in spring I need to go out with my basin of soapy warm water and collect those lily beetles and drown them in the bowl, and as a result then my lilies will go on and do well for me. And in spring, lilies benefit from a bit of a mulch. If you have some well rotted manure, horse manure at hand, that will just do wonderfully. Anyway, so Oriental and trumpet hybrid lily, Beverly Ann, definitely one of my top 10 for last year. Number 3 on my list of fabulously flowering beauties from last year is a Potentilla, and this is one that is bound to steal your heart. I absolutely love the double orange flowers that this little beauty produces, and it's a small plant that will make a beautiful, striking statement at the front of a border. An interesting feature for this particular Potentilla, or for all Potentillas in general, is that the foliage is very like strawberry foliage. So I've had people walking around the garden and saying, oh look, you've got strawberries growing here, but actually no, it's just the Potentilla. So it makes a mass of these beautiful double or semi-double orange flowers and looks just fantastic. And oh, the name, I didn't tell you what the name means. So it's called Arc-en-ciel, which means rainbow. And I don't really see how these flowers have anything to do with a rainbow, but it's a good name anyway. Anyway, I'm happy to count this Potentilla in my top 10 for last year. And now we move on to number 4 on the list. And it is iris. And I am just going to cheat ever so slightly here because I'm going to mention 3 irises in this category. I just love irises, and I love how there is one for every season in your garden. And I want to illustrate that by mentioning 3 of my absolute favourite irises that did so well for me last year. So the first is one that flowers in February. Yes, February, when there's hardly anything out there except snow and just depression. And at that point in time, the reticulata iris will poke up. Now these are small little bulbs that produce small little plants that just send their flowers up on the surface of the ground. So you need lots of them to make a little bit of a statement. And they are such sweeties. Katharine Hodgkin's is my absolute favourite with her pale netted blue flowers. And she always looks so striking, especially if she pokes up through the snow. I love looking out for her, and I have her planted very near my kitchen so I can enjoy those flowers even if it's too cold to be out in the garden for very long. So that's my early flowering iris. And the second iris, which is the summer flowering bearded iris, is one that I have covered quite a lot in this year's videos. So I made a video, just a general iris tour of my garden, and mentioned several of my favourites because iris are such painters' flowers. The blooms are exquisite when they're open, and it's very hard not to photograph them and not to absolutely love them. And I think every garden needs some prima donnas like this, flowers that are absolutely exquisite when they're in bloom, even if they don't last a very long time. Champagne Elegance is the name of my favourite bearded iris, and it has muted brown and white colours, and it's repeat flowering, which I absolutely love. And let us not forget that some irises, of course, are scented, which is a great additional feature. I also made a video this summer about dividing irises, so look for that if you're interested. Oh, and I made a video about the reticulata iris as well, so that's all to look forward to if you're looking for something to view. But, okay, I did mention a trio of irises, and we have covered kind of really early spring, we have covered summer, and then you need to know also that irises can flower in deadly winter. Now I am talking December and January, and I am talking about the Algerian iris, which is one that's quite new to my garden. Perfectly hardy outdoors, provided it's in a well-drained soil. But because it flowers so very late, it is vulnerable to the frost. So if you have frost when it's budding or flowering, it can ruin the flowers. So many people who grow this successfully outdoors, what they do is they cut the flowers and they bring them indoors and enjoy them in a vase. Anyway, as I mentioned, this Algerian iris is new to my collection, and I'm currently growing it in a pot in the greenhouse, but I guess next year I'll decide whether I'm going to put it out in the garden or not. Anyway, irises, a wonderful group of plants, one for every season, and one which has done so well in Douentza last year. And now for my next favourite plant from last year, favourite flower from last year, and we have something a little bit unusual and a little bit rare, and it's Glaucidium palmata, or the Japanese poppy. Now this is a spring flowering plant which flowers in April in my garden, and I love many things about it, not least of all its gorgeous palmate foliage that extends out and just does a great job of adding interest in the border even when the plant isn't in flower. And then it produces these large velvety poppy-like mauve violet flowers. Violet, I guess, is the real colour of them in April, and they look fabulous. And if you're a real connoisseur of the unusual, then this is definitely going to be a plant you're going to seek out and that you're going to love to grow in your garden. In terms of care, this is one that needs a shady, woodlandsy area preferably, certainly not a full sun plant. And do look out for slugs, they can be the devil. Next among my favourite flowering plants is a dahlia. And what better to choose than Dahlia Pooh? Now, I assume that this dahlia is named after Winnie the Pooh, who from the children's fables, but I've no confirmation of that. In any case, it's a good name for a beautiful flower. And this is a collarette type dahlia that produces orange, yellowy, flat blooms and a circular beard around the inner centre of the flower. A really nice plant, especially when you have a group of 5 or 7 of them in your border. And when I saw this first, I thought, actually, you know, the colours are really loud. It can be difficult to place this in the garden. But if you have a large group of them, it does a super job of brightening up perhaps a dull border. Now, because it's a dahlia, this is something that's going to flower for a really long time, certainly from July onwards. And if you keep deadheading, then it will keep on flowering. I've made lots and lots of videos about dahlia care, about potting them up, about lifting them, about planting them out, and you can go and seek those out if you need any more information. But certainly for last year, I can tell you that Dahlia Pooh earned its keep and did so well for me in the border that I have to count it among my top 10. Next up we have an early flowering plant. This one is called Lithos Aureus, and it's one I've raised from seed and one that flowers beautifully in April and May with these stunning pea-like flowers. Now this is a plant from Greece and one that is quite easy to care for, and you'll notice that the flowers are orange. Now the last plant I mentioned to you was Dahlia Pooh, which is also orange, but there couldn't be more of a difference between the shade of orange in Dahlia Pooh and the shade of orange in this Lathyrus. This Lathyrus is a much more subtle, understated plant, and the tones are quite muted but still quite gorgeous, and whereas it doesn't jump out at you, it certainly adds so much to the flavour and atmosphere of a border. And I absolutely love this guy. The foliage is not much to write home about, but actually you could say that about many of the plants we're talking about today. We're choosing them for their flowers, not for the foliage. And the flowers on this one really are super. And that's why I have chosen Lithos Aurea in my top 10 for last year. And next up we have an Achillea called Moonshine. And for anybody out there who doesn't like Achillea, bear with me, you're going to love this one. So it produces really striking flowers, yellow flowers in a flat umbel shape. So an umbel is a description of how certain plants hold their flowers in a kind of bowl structure, and the Achillea is no exception. And these flowers are really, really striking, really showstoppers when the plant is in bloom. And the big drawback, generally speaking, with Achilleas is that although the flowers are gorgeous and loved by bees and butterflies and the gardener alike, the foliage is really quite crap. And what I found with Achilleas in the past is that the foliage, the plant itself will tend to run too, so it's difficult to tell the difference between its foliage and weeds that are in the border, so you end up with a very messy situation. But that is not the case with Achillea Moonshine. And when I was considering this plant, I considered first for the separate video I'll make about my top 10 foliage plants for last year, because many gardeners would grow this plant for its glorious foliage alone. It's grey-green in colour, so looking fabulous whenever it's in leaf. And the whole plant, it clumps rather than runs, making a gorgeous mound. And then of course from July it's topped with these striking flat yellow umbelliferous flowers, making it just really a showstopper of a plant, and one that is a great one to grow and easy to grow as well, because it takes, I think generally speaking, anything that has kind of the grey foliage or silvery foliage can tolerate rougher soil than other things. So I'm really happy to have this in my garden and to recommend it as one of my top plants for last year. The next plant I'm very happy to recommend is a daylily, or a Hemerocallis. And I guess before I tell you about this beauty that I've chosen for my top 10, I just need to give a bit of a preamble about growing daylilies. And it's to say, well, I suppose first of all to point out the obvious, that the flowers, individual flowers, would last from up to say about 16 hours. That's why it's called a daylily. But the plants will produce a surplus of flowers at any given time. So there's a lot going on, and you don't need to worry about the fact that any individual might last such a short time. But the thing about growing daylilies in Ireland, in my part of the world, is that when you have a good summer, when you have a summer when the sun splits through the sky, then your daylilies will do wonderfully and you'll have lots and lots of blooms and they will look super. However, if you have a dull summer, a wet summer, which happens all too often here in Ireland, then what will happen is your daylilies will barely flower and you'll just be left with a whole clump of monocot leaves that are green and nothing else all through the summer. And there's no point in that. If you're growing daylilies for their flowers, and that is the real reason why people grow them, then you need flowers. So you need to choose which daylily is recommended as doing well in our climate. Now, I know in some other places, in some parts of America, for example, they grow daylilies so easily. They have fantastic hybrids, and when these flowers finish, when the plant finishes flowering, they can just shear the whole thing to the ground, which I would not recommend in Ireland. I don't think it would respond well in our climate to that kind of treatment at all. So in this part of the world, listen out for other people's recommendations for good daylilies. And a good daylily is Hemerocallis Rocket City, which is this glorious orange one that I have and have had for many years. It was gifted to me for my birthday by my son Josh many years ago, and it has always flowered so well in the garden. Again, we're talking an orange flower here, and I do love my orange flowers, but it has like kind of echoes of yellow and white in there and looks so good. In terms of care, you need to do very little with daylilies except cut them back in spring and deadhead. Yes, you do need to deadhead daylilies, I find. If you don't deadhead them, then you're left with a lot of withered flowers, because these flowers are producing daily and dying daily. So just a little nip out with your nail just below where the plant would produce seed is enough to just tidy up the appearance of the whole thing. And yeah, so anyway, Hemerocallis Rocket City has always done well in my garden for the 10 years that I've had it, and I can certainly recommend it as a great one to grow. And that brings us to the last in my top 10 of flowering plants for last year, and this one is a bit unusual. I guess it's unusual because it is an easy and common plant, and my choice for number 10 is Crocosmia Lucifer, which produces large, broad, pleated sword-like leaves and vermilion flowers on top. A really striking plant that makes big clumps and looks magnificent. And I have to tell you that 20 years ago, when I was starting my garden, this is a plant I begged from my mother, and she dug up some bulbs from her own garden in the wrong time of year and brought them to me, like kind of just without any soil or anything. I think the greenery was still on top, but we had to cut that off, and I thought these bulbs will never survive. Planted them in the ground, and yeah, they did survive, because this plant, Crocosmia Lucifer, is tough as old boots. So it's a super plant for a rough area, an area which isn't very actively maintained, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So this plant is definitely a bit of a thug, and I must warn you that it is not generally one that I would plant in a border, because once you plant it, it better be in the right place, because you will never get it out again. It produces a big clump and bulbs on top of bulbs, so you have a big mass like that on top of the soil. And don't listen to those who tell you that you can divide this big clump by cutting it like a cake in slices. It doesn't work. It can't be done for anything that's really well established. And I have to tell you as well that a couple of years ago I took this notion and planted a couple of bulbs of Crocosmia Lucifer in a border, because I mean the flowers really are amazing, and then I saw sense and the following year took them out. However, it took me several years after that removing small bulbils from that area that had been left behind by Lucifer. So yeah, make sure you plant it in the right place before you plant it. But it's a great plant for kind of rougher areas, and I have it in the garden between the trunk of my cherry blossom tree and the box hedge. Nothing else grows in there, just Lucifer, and that's the way Lucifer likes it. And I also have a really big clump down at the front of the garden, which gets very little care. So in terms of care, in spring I would cut off the dead leaves and remove them. And that's really it to get super flowers from Crocosmia Lucifer. Okay, and I guess now I've covered all 10 of my favourite flowering plants for last year. These are ones that were grown for their amazing flowers, and they certainly brought a lot of joy and smiles to my face and to the garden during the summer. If you would like some more videos in this series, perhaps I'll make one about foliage plants, which is very interesting in itself. Thank you very much for watching and for subscribing, and I will encourage you to go and check out memberships by hitting the join button to see what you would get if you were to become a channel member, and it would be wonderful if I could welcome you on the other side. Thank you again, and that's all for now. Bye!